Marcus, and welcome to Abstract Essay, where the essay shape thoughts find that, and every conversation explores the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest. He's America's leading reading ambassador, no other than Dr. Danny Brassells.
Thanks so much for having me on tonight, Daniel. More importantly, thanks for splitting some joy in the book.
Welcome, Dr. Danny on Abstract Essay. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Well, if I was going to write an autobiography, I'd probably call it Pivots because I feel like I've already lived 9 lives. 30 years ago, I was a journalist covering President Bush Sr. in the 1992 presidential election. I loved my job. I got to meet every editor of every major daily. And one editor offered me the city beat for $16,500 a year. Meanwhile, a friend told me they were hiring teachers in South Central Los Angeles for $25,000 a year. So I became a teacher for the noblest of reasons, Daniel, for the high. And I actually fell in love with teaching. I've actually taught all age levels from preschoolers all the way up to rocket scientists. I can make that claim because I used to teach English as a second language to engineering students at the University of Southern California. And in 2005, my wife and I attended a real estate seminar, which turned out to be a scam, and we lost everything. And I could give you the woe is me story, but I'm a positive person. I learned a lot from the experience. First of all, I learned that my wife is my soulmate. I put her through the ringer, and she stood right by me. She's an incredible human being. Second of all, I learned that money's not everything because you can lose money just like that. Third, I try not to judge other people because if I was somebody who saw what I had done, I would have said, well, you deserve that. But now I realize unless you know everything about a person, you really don't know anything about a person. Fourth, I became a Christian, which I'm always embarrassed to confess. It took a catastrophe to get me there. But the more I read my Bible, I realize I'm not the first screw up to find Jesus. And fifth, I didn't want to file for bankruptcy, and my accountant said, well, you have to earn this much more money this year. And so I started speaking on the side, and I hit that number right on the number. Well, the next year, Daniel, he gave me a much higher number, and I hit that number right on the number. So in year 3, I thought, well, maybe I should set a higher number. And basically, during one of the worst economic downturns in world history, I was able to build up a highly lucrative speaking business, which eventually drew the attention of some pretty famous people and companies who asked me to coach them, which I have to confess, I really resisted coaching for a long time because you need to know this about me, Daniel. I have a very high standard for my students. I will not let you fail. I will push you and hold you accountable until you succeed. Well, now that I work primarily with entrepreneurs and executives and business owners, I find that they're highly motivated. They do the work, and it's probably been the most rewarding and gratifying thing I've ever done. So how's that for a long answer to your short question?
I like it. I like it, Dr. Danny. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. And today let's talk about the stage to sales, converting speaking engagement into a client generation systems. And before that, I'm inviting you to be my guest on Bible verses 101. And let's talk about one of your favorite verse in the Bible, if you're
Well,
interested.
so when I was down at my lowest, really what helped me out was Genesis 50:20, which is, I always look at the Bible in a funny way. Basically, Joseph has died, and excuse me, Jacob has died, and all of a sudden Joseph's brothers are freaking out because they left him for dead, and they're like, oh no, now that dad's dead, he's going to avenge us. And so they come up to Joseph like, hey, Joe, before dad died, he said, like, you're not supposed to avenge all that bad stuff we did to you. And Joseph's really cool, Daniel. He says, oh, no, man. Everything you meant for evil, God meant for good. And so that's what really got me through those hard times was I know that there was darkness, but it has to get really dark before it gets really bright.
Interesting. One thing I observed to you, Dr. Danny, you are authentic comedian. So tell us, most speakers see the stage as the end goal. How do you shift the mindset to view speaking engagement not as a performance, but as the first step in a sophisticated client generation system?
Well, that's a great question, Daniel. Well, most of my clients, they actually have no interest in speaking or they're terrified of speaking. And I have to convince them, I'm like, speaking to me is the fastest way to grow your business. And you're right, it's the first step. And the only way I evaluate our effectiveness as a speaker. Is people come up to me, they say, hey, people are telling me I'm a great speaker. I'm like, well, that's wonderful. Or they'll say, hey, I got a standing ovation. I'm like, that's fantastic. But we only evaluate your effectiveness in one way and one way only. Are people in your audience deciding to take the next step with you? Now, the next step, it can be an unpaid next step, like subscribe to my podcast or vote for me. It can be a paid next step, like buy my product or invest in my coaching program. But what we want to find out is we need to know our numbers and figure out how are you, I want you to move hearts, but I also want you to move the needle because that's what's going to make you prosperous as a business person.
Interesting, Dr. Danny. So, what is the single most important thing a speaker must do before they can even step on a stage to set a condition for successful conversion?
Well, so I have two business partners. I co-founded the Well Crafted Story Workshop with Coach Jimmy Hayes Nelson and Dave Ward. I always joke, I call us the professor, the performer, and the producer because my background is in academia. Coach Jimmy used to be a Broadway actor, and Dave is an attorney. And if there's one secret sauce that we love to tell people, your most important thing strategy on stage. I watch a lot of great speakers. Brene Brown's one of my favorites. She talks about the importance of vulnerability. I completely agree with her. So here's the strategy: stop sharing your successes on stage. Start sharing your failures because not everybody in your audience has succeeded, but they've all failed. And the more you share your own failures, the more your audience is going to start seeing themselves in you. And this is really what you're trying to achieve when you're on stage: is how do I connect with that audience so that they want to work with me in the future?
Dr. Donny, the traditional speaker's bio is often a career obituary. What is the core element of an conversion focused introduction to that host must deliver to prime the audience?
Well, you have to bear with me. I'm a former teacher, so everything I do either rhymes or it's alliterative. And so, what we came up with is what we call our 5 C's process. And so, before we put together a presentation, the first C is clarity. There are 2 questions you have to ask yourself before you go on stage. And if you can answer these questions, you're in good shape. And if you cannot, you're going to have a real difficult time. And you'd be amazed, Daniel, 95% of the people I work with cannot answer one or both of these questions in a succinct manner before we start working with them. So those 2 questions are: who is your audience and what is the problem that you solve? I'll ask people, who's your audience? They'll say, oh, everybody. I'm like, well, if your audience is everybody, your audience is nobody. I really want you to focus in on a very specific avatar. Who's that one person you want to affect? Once you know who that person is, then you have to understand, well, what's the problem I'm solving for this person? Because all you have to understand is your audience doesn't care about you. All they care about are their problems. When I'm talking to people that are worried about selling on stage, I say, well, stop selling, start serving. Look at your audience like they're starving to death and you have food. And if they don't get your food, they will starve to death. And so then we get into the other 4 C's of our process, which are to connect with your audience, teach meaningful content, have a clear call to action, and finally to end with an emotional close.
With emotional code, I love that. Dr. Danny, how do you strategically choose which speaking opportunities are like to be fertile ground for clients versus those that are just for brand exposure?
Well, I always say that there's only 2 ways to get better as a speaker. First of all, you need to watch lots of speakers. I watch 10 speakers a day. I watch televangelists. I watch politicians. I watch comedians. I watch them in front of big groups, in front of small groups, in front of men, in front of women. Here, I'll give your audience a ninja strategy. I watch a lot of
Mhm.
televised award shows because when a person wins the Academy Award, they only have 45 seconds to connect with their audience. I want to see how they choose to use their time. Now, most people waste their time. They get up there, they're like, I want to thank God. I want to thank the Academy. It's stupid. Nobody's paying attention. Every now and then, Daniel, somebody does an incredible job. So a few years ago, there was a gentleman by the name of Joe Walker who won the Academy Award for Best Film Editing. Now,
Okay.
this is Hollywood, the Academy Awards. The important people are in the front of the room, the actors. And you can tell this is film editing. The camera's scanning the crowd. They're not paying attention. Joe Walker gets on stage. He's British. He speaks very slowly and deliberately. He says, a lot of people don't know this, but when phrased properly, the term Academy Award nominee can be used as an insult. Well, now the camera's scanning the crowd. You see people leaning in like, what's he talking about? He says, for example, yesterday I got in an argument with my 17-year-old daughter, and she said, well, Academy Award nominee Joe Walker. All of a sudden, you see everybody laughing hysterically off stage. Denzel Washington wants to meet him. Sandra Bullock wants to meet him. Brad Pitt wants to meet him. Time Magazine said he was one of the highlights of the Academy Awards. Well done, Mr. Walker. That's how you connect. So the first way you get better at speaking is watching a lot of great speakers. The second way you get better at speaking, I've had lots of wonderful mentors throughout my career. One of them was a guy by the name of Jim Rohn, and Jim used to say, you can't pay other people to do your push-ups. Translation, you got to do the work. I mean, so really directly answering when people are choosing, I say, hey, don't be picky. Like, you need to get some reps in. Like, even the smallest towns have a Lions Club, an Optimist Club, a Rotary Club, a Kiwanis Club. They got women's clubs. They got all kinds of organizations and chambers of commerce and churches and schools and synagogues and temples. You know, you got to get out there. It drives Coach Jimmy crazy that I go on so many podcasts. He's like, why are you going on that podcast? I'm like, well, there's two reasons why I go on every podcast I go on. First of all, it gives me an opportunity to practice. I mean, you've already asked me some questions nobody's ever asked me before, Daniel, which is great. And so it's given me an opportunity to craft an answer. And so the next time a person asks me that question, ooh, I'm going to sound even better because I have a little bit of practice with that answer. The second thing, and this drives Coach Jimmy crazy, he's like, only one person listens to that and I'm like, oh, I don't care how many are listening. All I care is who. I mean, if you're a sales manufacturer and your top client's the only person that listens to a podcast, that's the only person you need listening. You have no idea who's out there and what their influence is. I'll give you an example. When I first started speaking 20 years ago, I had one speakers bureau that would pay me $700 a day for a full day training. In my local library, they asked me if I would do a free presentation. I said, sure, that's fine. They're like, we're going to have 500 people. Well, Daniel, 4 people showed up. 2 of them story. 2 of them were my realtors. The other 2 was a Hispanic couple that didn't speak a word of English. Well, I believe in giving 110%, so I did as much in Spanish as I could. We laughed. We had a good time. A week later, the Hispanic woman, it turns out she was taking English classes at the Adult Literacy Center. She recommended me to do a keynote address for 45 minutes for $4,000, which was 6 times my daily fee at the time. And I realized, whoa, you have
Something
no idea
good.
versus around you, man.
Yes, it happened for a reason. Dr. Danny, would you be my guest also on Comedy 101? You're truly authentic comedian. So let's talk about the content and talk architecture. What are
So
the yes. Go ahead.
Content's interesting, Daniel. It's the largest part of your presentation, and ironically, it's the least important because research shows. I'm a teacher, so I like research. So research shows people remember the beginning of your talk and the end of your talk, but they don't remember anything in between. Translation, oh my gosh, the bun's more important than the burger. But here's what we also know. The research shows that what people do remember is, are you helpful? And so I believe you have a responsibility, whether your audience decides to take that next step with you or not. They've already given you their most valuable asset, their time, and you have a responsibility to serve those people. And so the research shows all you have to do is prove that you're helpful. So one of my mentors in speaking, this is years ago, was a guy, and he's no longer with us, but his name was Jim Trelease, and he goes around teaching parents how to read aloud to their kids. Well, in the middle of his presentation, all of a sudden he said, "Oh, I'm going to teach you all something. This will save your life someday. If you ever lock yourself out of your car, if you have your cell phone, call your spouse and have your spouse put the car keys next to your cell phone, and then you put your cell phone next to your car door, it will unlock the car door." Daniel, I've tried this from 3,000 miles away. It works. It probably doesn't work
really
on a Toyota Corolla at the time. And here's the point of this story. This has nothing to do with what he's talking about, but he had people for years come up to, "Oh my gosh, you're the greatest speaker ever. I got locked out of my car. That saved my life. I've been referring you to all these different schools." This has nothing to do with his presentation, but what he demonstrated is he's helpful. I mean, how many people are actually helpful in the world? So this is the important piece of your content is how can you help your audience?
Definitely how you will entertain them and of course give knowledge and wisdom just like Dr. Danny. So what are the characteristics of an irresistible past talk offer that feels like a logical and loris next step on the audience member?
Yeah, so your questions are fantastic, Daniel. I got to bring you on the road with me. So the other part
Thank
of
you.
content that's important is you have to understand that audiences are very sophisticated nowadays. They understand when somebody's selling them and they understand when somebody's teaching them. And so the content portion of your presentation is when most people teach, and then people abruptly say, "Oh, and if you want more of this, you can buy my program for $2,000." I got forms in the back. They're like either apologizing to the audience or they're very brusque, and it's because they've gone from teaching mode into sales mode. And so, one of the little ninja strategies we share with our clients is what we want you to do is to act like a farmer throughout your presentation. You need to be planting seeds. And so, this is why it's important to have one clear call to action. Whatever you want the audience to do, just make it one thing, one, not two, just one. I always say that if you look at grocery store statistics across the United States, you look at the big name brands like the Ralphs or the Publix grocery store or Kroger or any of them, they're not the number one grocery store chain in America. The number one grocery store chain in America is Trader Joe's. And the reason is when you go to get mustard, when you go to the store to get mustard at one of these big grocery stores, you go to get mustard and there's 38 different types of mustard. When you go to Trader Joe's, there's one. It's called mustard.
Mhm.
I, Again, former teacher, everything I do either rhymes or it's alliterative. Voices confuse, cause you to lose. Translation have one clear call to action. So, for example, I was on a podcast the other day, and the hostess, she ended the podcast. She said, I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Make sure you like, subscribe, and give us a 5-star review. We got off the air. I said, you just asked your audience to do 3 things. They're not going to do any of them.
For sure.
It's very important.
Definitely.
Yeah, have one clear call to action. And so when you're planting seeds, so let's say your call to action is we'll use you as an example, Daniel. I want you to subscribe to my podcast. And so while I'm teaching my I'll say 3 teaching points about how to master speaking. So I'll start on my first teaching point. I'm like, well, Daniel's a person that subscribed to my podcast, and he was able to learn how to master speaking on stage within only 3 episodes. Here's what your audience is doing. You don't realize that you're doing this. Your brain is processing lots of information at the same time. I mean, right now you're listening to me, but really you're thinking, oh gosh, when's this interview going to be over? I really am hungry. Did I do my homework? You have 28 different things.
Uh,
And so when I just planted that seed, now the person's sitting there, they're like, Daniel has a podcast. I wonder what the name of his podcast is. I wonder if I could get on that podcast. That sounds really interesting. And so by the time you get to your call to action, you say, oh, and so I'm inviting all of you to subscribe to my podcast. Now people are like, oh, wow. I was hoping he was going to tell us the name of the podcast because I really wanted to subscribe. It's very different than a person that all of a sudden abruptly goes into sales mode, like, oh, and if I've been useful for you today, I want you to subscribe to my podcast. That's very different. And then the other mistake a lot of people make is they end with their call to action. And so I always said that there's 2 types of people in the audience. I'm going to be very stereotypical and say it's the husband and the wife. The husband's the guy sitting there with his arms crossed. We call him Joe Friday. He
okay.
just wants just the facts. How much is this going to cost? What do I got to do? How long does it take? And a very clear call to action should answer all of those questions for Joe Friday. But if you end with Joe Friday, you're ignoring the wife, who's Julia Roberts. Julia Roberts, she doesn't care what Daniel's selling. She just wants to feel good. Daniel makes me feel good. I listen to all of his podcasts because I always feel better after I listen to his podcast. And when you can create a good emotional close that ties in with that call to action, you're going to have a much bigger impact. So I'll give you an example. We were working, and by the way, whenever I refer to our clients, I never give the real names. You can ask Jimmy. Jimmy will tell you everybody's name. I'm a little bit more discreet. Uh, Working with a woman nutritionist, and so she used to end her presentation with her call to action. She suffered from this intestinal digestion problem for years, and she came up with her own method of solving it. And so now she has a 90-day program for women with this problem, and it costs 1997. And that's how she ended her presentation. I'm like, wrong, you can't do that. This is not right. I'm like, you need to end with something that's going to inspire the audience. And she's like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, what do you want your audience to do? She's like, buy my program. I'm like, yeah, I know you want them to buy your program, but what's the message there? And we went back and forth for 5 minutes, and finally she said, well, I want the women in my audience to know they can't do it on their own. I'm like, oh, you need to hire an expert story. And she's like, what's that? I'm like, I'll give you an example. I'll leave you all with this. Many years ago, my wife and I, we had theater tickets. We were dressed to the nines, driving to the theater when we got a flat tire. And my wife said, well, I'll call the AAA tow truck. I'm like, you don't have to call AAA. I'm a man. So I got out of the car. I opened up the trunk. I got the spare tire. Then I got the pumper thing, and I got the big jack thing to try and undo the nuts on the tire. 27 minutes later, I have grease all over me. I have not fixed the flat tire. My wife is standing beside the car with her arms crossed, shaking her head like, I could have done so much better than this guy. Well, unbeknownst to me, she had called the tow truck 27 minutes earlier. This tow truck shows up, and this 17-year-old punk hops out of the tow truck, and he fixes my flat tire in just 3 minutes. You know, I think there are times in life when all of us think we can do it on our own, but if you want to save time, you want to save money, you want to save a whole lot of headache and embarrassment, you hire an expert. And so what I've done is I've taken a metaphorical story now to plant the seed in your head, like, you know what? I've tried lots of things. Maybe I need Kathy's program to help me out. So here's a strategy for your audience, Daniel. And this will be for you too. Later on, maybe tomorrow, sit in a comfortable chair with a pen and paper, libation of choice. And for an hour, I want you to write down every story that's ever happened to you. And I don't mean the entire story. I just mean triggers, like the time I locked myself out of the car in front of Costco, the time Dad spilt mustard on his tie at that fancy restaurant. You'll find in an hour you can come up with a couple of hundred triggers like this. Okay, so that's the first part of the exercise. The second part of the exercise is then I want you to think about, well, what's this story really about? Oh, this is a story about never giving up. Oh, this is a story about friendship. Oh, this is a story about loyalty. On my computer, I have hundreds of files with those types of names and filled with tens of thousands of stories, so that when I want my audience to feel a certain emotion or to do a specific thing, I have a story that relates to that. I mean, that's the difference between a good presentation and an outstanding presentation. Good presentations are entertaining. Great presentations are intentional.
Interesting, Dr. Daniel. Thank you so much for sharing the tips. And before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my Bible verses 101 in its first season too, book 101 review in fifth season, comedy 101 in third season, food 101 in fifth season, geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast Law 101 and Mental Health 101, Love Letters in fourth season, as well as Movie 101, Music 101, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its second season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Dr. Daniel, give them a sample. Let's say you won the Oscar. Let's give us this direct communication with the audience. And let's say, and the Oscars goes to Dr. Danny
Well,
Brassells.
As a thank you, Daniel, for you and your audience happen to listen to me and my stories, I did want to give everybody a freebie. So if you go to freestoryguide.com, guide like a tour guide, freestoryguide.com, I'm going to give everybody their own free complimentary copy of their own well-crafted story blueprint. What this is the actual process that Coach Jimmy and I take our clients through to help you create your well-crafted story. What this does for you is it takes the guesswork out of where do I put this in my presentation and why am I putting it here? And what this means for you is the peace of mind that you now have a system to turn your audience into clients. You can get that at freestoryguide.com. And Daniel, I just wanted to thank you again for having me on. You're just a real hoot. And you're an
Likewise.
underachiever. You only have 28 different podcasts right now. We need to get another 50 for you.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Dr. Danny. And I'm inviting you to please do come over on Bible versus 101 or any of my podcasts. And wow, I like your energy. I want to bring those guests always like that. So, Dr. Danny, again, can you please invite our listeners to support all your business, your advocacy, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Yeah, if you just go to Free Story Guide, I promise you that it'll probably put you on some email list that you'll get emails from me for the rest of your life.
Yes, for sure. And yes, people, let's support Dr. Donny because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering business like this to come. So, Dr. Donny, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Dan.
More to come, people. See you soon.